Marie Durant. During the time of the Reformation, because of the teaching and preaching of John Calvin and some other reformers, there were almost 30% Protestant in France. They were called the Huguenots. But then in 1685, Louis XIV, the French king, he cancelled the Edict of Nantes, which gave the people some degrees of religious freedom. And then the French Catholic kings began 2 centuries of persecution of Protestants in France. They would arrest all the Protestant pastors, put them in prison, or most of the time they would just kill them. And then they would also arrest the Protestant men. So all these were husbands and fathers or sons. And they would put them in prison or send them to the galley. The galley means they have to row this big ship like slaves. And often they were, of course, mistreated, they got sick, and many of them died when they were still very young. And they would also send soldiers, called the dragons, to Protestant families and harass or bully the family in their own homes until they would renounce their faith. It was in this context that Marie Durant was born. She was born in this Protestant family, and the family would study the Bible in secret because it was illegal to own or read a Bible at that time. Only the priest could do that. And her brother Pierre was a pastor of the desert. That means in the south, they have an assembly for more the uneducated people, and they would just preach to them. And he traveled in the region doing secret meetings for all the Christians. In 1730, Marie was arrested when she was only 19, just because she was the sister of Pierre. And they put him in this Tower of Constance. It's like a tower, but actually a kind of a prison. And just 2 years later, in 1732, her brother Pierre was arrested at the age of 32, and he was executed by the king's soldiers almost immediately afterwards. Marie was in this prison with 30 other women, and she was the youngest. They had to stay in this cold and damp prison with not enough to eat, with no privacy at all, living in a group and under constant surveillance from the guards. They were separated from their family and friends and living a very difficult life, actually having nothing to do. All that Marie has to do was to renounce her faith in Jesus. She also only had to sign a paper and she could walk out free, as a free woman. But she would not do that. Instead, she would spend time encouraging and supporting the other women in the prison, helping them to resist. And actually on the wall of the prison, they saw the words, "Résistez," carved on the wall. And it was from Marie. Finally, in 1768, she was freed after spending 38 years in this prison. When she was freed, she was already 57 years old, an old woman. And she died 8 years later because she was already very fragile, very, very weak after all these years of imprisonment. So can you imagine? Can you spend 38 years in the prison just because of your faith? I'm not sure if I can even survive 10 years of that kind of imprisonment. But Marie is really an example for us how we should defend our faith in Jesus, no matter what the circumstances may be. So she is really our heroine. Thank you.